Now what we're going to do as the next step is create a Git repository for our Terraform project. So whatever changes we make to our Terraform configuration, we can actually work with the repository. So we have a history of the changes, and also other team members can check out the code and work on the same project as well. So first of all, I'm going to go to GitLab UI, and here I'm just going to create a new blank project. Let's call it Terraform Learn. So inside the company it will be probably a private repository. I'm going to make it public so that others can access my project here. The remote repository exists in GitLab, so we can connect our local project to the remote repository. So it means that we are going to make it into a Git project. So in here, I'm in the root folder of the project. So we're going to do git init, and this will initialize an empty repository. And what we're going to do is we are going to connect it to the remote, right? Push an existing folder. So you already have a existing repository, or existing code. And what you need to do is git remote add origin, and it will point to the remote project, which is this one right here. So I'm gonna execute it. And now if I do git status, it tells me that I have to check in all this code. Right. Now, as a next step, before we actually check in everything that we have, we're going to create a gitignore file. Because the thing is, we don't need to check all of this information or all of these files to the repository. Some of the files shouldn't be checked into the repository. And let me create a gitignore file, and then we're going to see what these files are. So gitignore. So the first thing we're going to ignore in the changes, so what we're not going to check into the repository, is this .terraform folder here. This basically just stores the providers that are installed locally, so it doesn't have to be part of the code. When you do Terraform init, this will be downloaded on your computer locally, so we don't have to check that in, and we're gonna ignore it. Let's actually add a comment here: local Terraform directory, and we're gonna ignore the whole folder. Another thing we want to ignore and not check in is Terraform state, because obviously Terraform state is a generated file that gets updated every time we do Terraform apply, and this is a local state when you are playing around and doing apply, so we're gonna ignore this one as well. Terraform state file or files. We have two of them. We have the current state and we have the previous one, so we're gonna ignore both of them. So let's do tf state. So every file with this extension, as well as .backup. What we also gonna ignore is the Terraform variable files. And the reason why is that, as I said, Terraform variables are basically a way to give users of Terraform, maybe other team members, a way to set the parameters for the configuration file. And these parameters will be different based on which environment you are using. So changes depending on the environment. And also this variables file may actually contain some sensitive data, could be password, private keys of the users themselves. So for example, you may be pointing to your private SSH keys, or some certificates and other secrets could be different for different team members. So we're gonna ignore the Terraform variables file. So each user of this Terraform project should have their own copy locally. So variable, let's say tf variable files, may include sensitive data, tf vars, right? So all the files that are ending with .tf vars extension. And as I saved this configuration, you see that those ignored files or folders actually became gray. So they're automatically removed from git diff. So basically git just ignores any changes made to these files and they're not displayed as something to be checked in. So now if I do git status, there you go. You see all these files that we ignored are not on the list here, but we have git ignore file. So we're going to check this remaining stuff in. Basically, we just have main.tf and we have Terraform look file, right? And this one should be checked in actually because this is a list of providers that you have installed locally with their versions. And this should be in the repository. So we're going to add all of these. We're going to do initial commit. And now if we go back to the repository, for the first push, we're going to do upstream origin master. So we're pushing to master branch from local to, and you only have to do it first time when you're pushing the branch changes for the first time to any branch for the very first time. After that, you can just do git push. So we have pushed our changes to repository. If I refresh it, there you go, you see 3 files checked in here. So we can now work in the repository and make changes, create branches for trying out different use cases, etc. So we have all the history in here.